Test. Hello, welcome. This is part 2 of the Emacs tutorial. And so in part 1, I talked about the basics of vanilla Emacs and like basic key bindings, maneuvers, and things we need to know if we're going to work in Emacs, whether or not we plan to stay vanilla or not. The things that to get you up and running, get you started. Part 2, I'm in this episode planning to talk about the basics of things that I missed, such as like how to comment a line of code, how to find and replace, how to ask for help online using debug init so that we can actually share helpful output, how to write an Emacs function, bind it to a key. I need to talk about the scratch and messages buffers. Those are items that I missed. And then on top of that, I want to get into Emacs macros and the various terminals that are available, key binding conventions, an Emacs workflow versus a Vim workflow, GPG, the Emacs web browser, which is the browser, the text web browser, IRC, email, and some other things. So hopefully that's pretty ambitious. That's a lot, but going through part 1 of what I demonstrated, and then this, I'm hoping that it would actually get a lot of people up to speed if they were motivated to go through it all and be able to use Emacs for anything at that point. So let's get started. So again, this is vanilla Emacs. The very first thing I'm going to do is open Emacs. Let's go. All right, here we are. So the very first thing to add on to what we went over last time would be, how do we comment a line of code? Okay, very easy. So if we open a file, like we went over before, our init.el file, and I've added some things here. Let's comment this for now. So how do we comment an uncomment code? You know, it's Control X, Control semicolon, and again Control X, Control semicolon, and we can highlight lots of things. Control X, Control semicolon, Control / to undo. If it's commented already, Control X, Control semicolon will uncomment, and if we select a whole thing that is not commented, Control X, Control semicolon will comment. Okay. The next thing would be, how do we find and replace? Okay, so let's find a word in here that appears multiple times. Maybe the word user. I see it here on line 1 and 2. There might be more. Let's see. Yeah, and line whatever that is. And by the way, where do we see what line it is? If we go down to it, we can see down here on the screen on line 31 right here. Okay, that's the Emacs default. There is a binding to put it on the left, like some people like. Personally, I think that's a little distracting. I don't need my line very often, so I'll just jump to the line and look down here if I want it. But yeah, do some research if you want it to always appear on every single line. What number it is, feel free. So, if I want to replace the word user on every single line, the binding for that is by default simply yes. So that'd be Alt Shift 5. So it's Alt Shift and the % sign, and that's just find and replace. So if I want to replace the word user with enter and then blah, then enter, then okay, so now it starts doing it. And one helpful thing to note here is often in Emacs, it'll have something like this. Like, what am I supposed to press? You know, and usually it's Y for yes and for no. and then there might be other options, and it's giving you a clue. You can hit the question mark if you want to see what everything is possible here. So if we hit I just hit the question mark, and it goes through all these potential things, okay? But basically, why is yes, no is no, and exclamation mark should be yes on every potential question, okay? So I'm gonna jump over here and hit Q to drop out of that, and I'm gonna back up just a little bit to the beginning of that string, hit Alt Shift %, and then it's actually defaulting to what I wanted to do earlier, which was replace the word user with blah. So I will press enter, and then let's do yes, yes, yes. Okay, so that's find and replace. Seems like a pretty basic thing. So again, Alt Shift %. That's how you find and replace in Emacs. Okay. The very next thing to really talk about, I wanted to get into debug-init. So let's introduce an error on purpose, and because what will happen is you'll screw something up. It happens to everybody. So like right here, for example, we're defining a function in this. I'm gonna get into this later, but let's introduce a syntax error. So I'm gonna remove this matching empty argument spot. This is where you would put arguments like, you know, arg1, arg2, or no arguments to this function. So there you go. Let's just remove the closing parenthesis. So that's definitely an error. So we're gonna save it. We think everything is good in the world. We closed Emacs. Okay. And next time we open Emacs, we get a problem. Okay, so Emacs opens, but initially, when it's initting our config, whatever was in the config, it didn't load after the error. That's a key. That's a key when you're troubleshooting your shit. So we look at what it says, and it's just like freaking out about init.el, and it introduces us to this. Oh yeah, just add the debug in it. So word to the wise, if you're sharing your config online, whether it's like in IRC or something, or on Reddit, go ahead and include this debug in it. People will thank you later. So again, debug init, we get a little more stuff, okay, in the stack trace or whatever. So what is going on here? Honestly, I don't see much that's helpful other than init.el, but sometimes it is helpful. So provide that info when you can, okay? That's debug, it's kind of debug mode, extra verbose. So let's go ahead and fix our bug. All right, and then we'll eval the whole buffer to kind of bring it up to speed as if we had loaded without an error. Typo here. There we go. So, good, very good. Now, the next thing I wanted to get into is how to write an Emacs function and bind it to a key. So, you don't know Emacs Lisp, but you want to make a function that does something. How to get started. Honestly, AI is so good lately for basic stuff like this. Not, you know, if you're writing a whole framework or something, AI will make a mess currently. But for basic things, it's pretty good. It can save you a lot of time. So check this out. ChatGPT, write me an Emacs Lisp function that when executed sends the whole buffer to turnbin.com on port 999, copies the link to my clipboard. Okay, so like a paste bin. Let's do that in Emacs Lisp. It gives me this blob of code. We copy it. We drop it in here. And it's already in. Sorry, it's up here. It's this one. Starting at line 6. And you evaluate it. it's already evaluated, but you know, you can always run eval buffer. And so that makes the function accessible. And then how to bind a key would be right down here on line 24. Typically, you'll use global set key. There are other ways. As far as I know, global set key is the most common way, and using this KBD function. So we're going to set a global key binding to the keyboard with Control-C space T to open, to send everything on the page to term bin. So this is kind of dangerous. For example, if you ever hit Control-C-T by accident and you're working on your company's like proprietary code, and then you send all this shit to the public internet, I mean, you could lose your you could lose your job. So I don't really recommend these, but it's fun. So if we hit Control-C-T here, and just like that, it says buffer sent to term bin. It gives me a link, and it's already in my clipboard. So if we just prove it, let's go. You know, and there it is. You know, this is helpful too when sharing your stuff. Maybe asking for help in the IRC channels and stuff like that. We get in the Emacs list, but that's another guy with another tutorial. And there is I will say this though. I will. So back on the about Emacs, when you first open, I believe if we jump down to the manual, maybe it's not the manual. There is an Emacs Lisp tutorial though. I don't know where it is. Ironically, you know, this thing probably knows. Control HT loads the tutorial, I is the mini tutorial. Access the manual, the Emacs Lisp intro. Alright, so I believe we can hit Alt X, Emacs Lisp. Intro? No. Okay, let's really follow the directions. So Control H I. I wonder if it moved in a recent version of Emacs. No, this doesn't work. This thing's a piece of shit. So, maybe fuck that. Here it is right here. So, you know, we can dive in. This is in Emacs somewhere. It may have moved. I'm not totally 100% on that. I got to get moving. I wanted to cover a lot of stuff today. But basically, there's a lot of stuff here on learning Emacs Lisp if you want to. So I would recommend just Googling the official programming in Emacs Lisp tutorial. Okay, moving on. Scratch and message buffers. So every time you open Emacs, there's always, so here we go, there's always at least two buffers open. And so if we hit Control X and then B to open all the buffers and then Tab, okay, so we have messages and Scratch by default. So if we, by default in Emacs, capital M and then kind of Tab. Okay, so this is the basics information about things as we go. So for example, I just hit Control N, and then it even updates right here, next line, end of buffer. So it's like a little console of everything that's going on. Helpful again when troubleshooting Emacs and you're setting up something and it's not quite working yet. It's helpful to look at the messages log. Then next thing you really should know about is Emacs has a scratch buffer by default. So if we just kind of SC and then tab, we get to scratch, enter. Okay, so this is a scratch buffer. We can type here. All right, great. It's just a scratch buffer. By default, when you close Emacs, the scratch buffer, anything you typed in there goes away. For me, I want it to kind of save, and I use it like a little scratch pad notepad that persists. If you use Spartan Emacs, it does that by default. It's in my settings somewhere if you want to steal that bit of code. And by the way, while I'm in here, so if we want to do like Emacs Lisp, we can like add 2 + 2, and we can evaluate the defun, and it says down here it's 4. So everything in here, you can type Lisp in here, you can write whatever. That's just a scratch buffer. Anyway, and it's unkillable, by the way. So Control X K, I kill it. Okay, but Control X B, it's actually in the tab. Oh wait, no, my mistake. It is killable. You can kill the scratch buffer by default. On mine, it's unkillable. If I try to kill it in Spartan Emacs, it kind of drops to the bottom of the stack on my buffer list. So it's for me, it's an always open and always saved file. That's what I'm used to for years now. But by default, you can kill it and it just goes away. All right, so the next thing I wanted to get into was Emacs macros. Now, macros, this is actually probably where we're really getting started. I got to think about how we want to do this. I'm going to make sure. Okay. So, I mean, I don't know. Let's just play around. So the first thing with a macro is we need something that we want to repeat doing. So let's create a text file, just like example.txt. Okay, and then hello world and let's see, let's just kind of copy and paste this in a bunch of times. Okay, and then you can do more. I really should have thought of a real world example, but anything you can type, you can record and redo it. That's all this is. So what I want to do is some maneuvers. So for example, while I could just do Control N, Control K numerous times, because this is a simple example, you know, just to like get rid of some lines. So maybe if I wanted to get rid of all the worlds, I'll do Control N and then K and then NN and then K and then NN and then K. There's a pattern, NN and then K. Now, if I was at work and I was doing something more complicated than this, and it was a repeatable pattern, but it had like 20 steps, and it was going to take me all day, you can use an Emacs macro to repeat the process and get it done in 10 minutes. Okay? And you'll be a hero and you'll be a wizard. So you really should know how to do an Emacs macro, so let's go. So if I want to get rid of all the worlds in a way that does not make me repeat myself, because when you're editing text, you never want to repeat yourself. Just like if you're coding something, you don't want to repeat the same code over and over. You want to turn it into a module, abstract it out, and reuse it in some type of way, right? So, same way, we're going to do that with our editor. So I'm going to start here at line 1, and we hit Control X, and then opening parentheses. Okay. And now it says defining keyboard macro. So from here, I'm recording. Now I'm going to hit Control down, Control K. Maybe I don't want that line. I just want to remove the worlds. So Control K again, and then down. And now I'm going to hit Control X closing parentheses. And now it says keyboard macro defined. And now I'm going to hit Control X and then E to execute my macro. And then I'm going to hit E and just basically spam it until it's done. It didn't work because my recording didn't check out. Because I went and killed world twice. I went down, killed world twice, down. Let's try it again. No. Okay. Let's just try it without talking for a second. So, from here. Need a real example. Like, I get what's happening. It's my human brain isn't thinking about it like a computer at the moment. Let's look at some code again. Like, for example, if on every line I wanted to record an indentation adding 2 spaces, like that, we'll do Control X, open parentheses, space, space, Control N to go down, and Control A to go to the beginning of the line. And then we'll Control X, close parentheses. Now it's recorded. Okay. And then I'll undo and just kind of start it from the top and Control X, E to execute. And then E again. Okay. Again. Again, again, again. See, I'm indenting every line by 2 spaces in a recorded way. I'm not saying that there's not a more efficient way to do this, but I needed to break down an example of something simple enough. And so if we have a reproducible pattern that we can record and then do it on a line and then end the recording and then repeat the recording, then we can do it. And like, for example, you can kind of get weird. I think maybe even we can start a recording at the top of a file that's open. Like, let's look at Dured. We have a couple files here. I think that we could actually edit these other files if we wanted to. We could even include Dured in our recording. Open, like, for example, we could go here and we could say, okay, let's press, if we were recording, let's press enter. Let's go up a line. Let's make a comment. This is a comment. And then let's hit Control XD to open Dured. Let's go down one file. And then let's hit enter. And then let's stop the recording here and let it loop. And then you could actually go through all these different files and even do this thing and record and play the recording and edit all these files. You might even want to add in the macro recording, like that you're saving the file. I would recommend that if you, okay, yeah, we could have used a CLI tool like SED to do it, but sometimes at work, in my experience over the years, you'll end up with some type of weird scenario where it's like, we need this thing, we need it fast, we don't have a bunch of time for like regex and recording and SED. You're pretty busy, and sometimes just an Emacs macro can do something that's kind of niche like that you don't want to actually code it, but you just want to record this thing that is tedious. It's pretty good for that. So again, before I stop this part, basically, if you want to do a macro, it's Control X, open parenthesis, and then do something, and then end the recording, and then Control X E to redo it. And we can do stuff. So that's an Emacs macro for you in a nutshell. Use your imagination. Okay, moving on. Terminals. So terminals in Emacs includes numerous ways to do a terminal. So if I wanted to open a terminal right here in the same directory where I'm kind of working on this code, I'll just hit Alt-X shell, okay? And there I am in the terminal. I prefer shell. There's numerous ones. There's ANSI term, there's term, and there's eShell, and probably others. I want to talk about shell. So the reason why do we like shell? Because shell gives you all the Emacs keys. I can go up here and just immediately, kind of like I'm Tmuxing around, and I can immediately kill stuff, and it's in my clipboard, okay? I can highlight lines, I can copy, I can paste. Okay, so if I'm browsing a bunch of logs or something, or maybe I'm SSHing into like another computer on my LAN, you know, and okay, and then I needed to copy some output from something, of some logs or whatever, then I got it. Okay, that's why we like shell. Shell gets it done. Shell has some limitations. Yes, just about every potential Emacs binding works in shell. Okay. What shell doesn't do is support ncurses libraries. So if I had htop, I probably don't, but htop requires ncurses, and it's not installed. So that's not going to work. Top by default will work with this, and it'll give us text output because it detects that we're not an ncurses terminal. Cool. So, well, you need ncurses, you think, you know? I'll just chime in on that in my personal opinion just a little. So, and do we really need ncurses? Like, what do you want to know? You want to know top stuff? Top still works. I think I can hit like capital M and then enter, and the next update will give me like memory. Okay. You want to know how many processors are on a computer? You want to know how much disk space is available? Do you want to know how much memory is running? Mac OS doesn't have free, apparently, because it sucks. But in the real world, I'm on Linux at work, and free, you know, there's my disk space swapping. It's pretty easy to just get some basic info. You know. All right. So for most things, you know, well, if you want to kill a process, let's do it again. You know, you can see if it's running, and if it was running, you'd kill it. Okay, so I'm in the habit of kind of that workflow on the CLI. Very little in the real world anymore. Am I even SSHing into a server? I think at my last company, I don't know if I ever did it once. Everything was pipelined, automatic, and Kubernetes galore, and browser tabs, and you want to do something, you go through the UI on that shit. So yeah, but in my opinion, currently, I don't know why we need ncurses and graphical terminal interface, but okay, maybe you have one that you really, I can't judge. So if you wanted to do that in Emacs, you got to use ANSI term if you require ncurses for something like htop or glances or whatever. So ANSI-term, and let's go. So this would work. We don't have htop again, but yeah, this is ncurses. All right. So you're gonna need ANSI term for that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention in Emacs was about eShell. So yeah, I'm gonna close that terminal and then Alt-X eShell. eShell is interesting. So all right, it's the Emacs. So this is Bash or whatever plus this is shell plus Emacs Lisp. So it's kind of wild. You know what I mean? We can add and do some mathematics in using Emacs Lisp. Okay, and I never really messed with this. There's pros and cons. Look it up to your own research. But it might be possible to kind of, pipe some Emacs Lisp into, I don't know, what are we doing? I'm just messing around. There's no way that's right, but you get the idea. You could kind of get nuts with Emacs Lisp plus a shell script. If that was really your thing, you might really like that. I'm gonna hit Control D and get out of this, or Control XK. All right. So Emacs Alt X shell. This is your shell, and it's all here. And so yeah, that's the way to go, in my opinion. I love it. I'm so much faster in the terminal in shell mode than anyone I've seen personally in person that's messing around with things like Tmux or Scream. And okay. So the next thing I wanted to go over is key binding conventions. So here you notice when we bound this send to turn bend function to a key binding, we use global set key to Control C plus T. So basically the only thing to really know is in Emacs convention, Control X stuff is kind of reserved. And like, for example, Control X, Control semicolon, Control X, Control C, Control X, Control F. Okay. While Control C, so is kind of for you. And again, also Alt M is kind of for you. People tend to put, I think, Control C on globals, global bindings, like this one, if you wanted it to work on every potential language, versus like language specific bindings tend to be on Alt M. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. So those are some conventions. Control C is for you, Alt M is for you, Control C is for globals, Alt M is for language specific, Control X is pretty reserved for Emacs. If you start putting bindings on Control X, they may conflict with something currently or later if Emacs does something. So just a rule of thumb. So I want to talk about Emacs workflows. So basically, just in a nutshell, if you're coming from Vim, typically a Vim user will maybe be on the terminal a lot right here, and they'll be just like going to their projects, and maybe they use a helper to kind of help them browse through these projects really fast and get to the right file. And then they will automatically set their editor and visual environment variables, and then their helper will just open the file in Vim. They'll edit one file, and then they'll : WQ, close Vim, and get to something else. And then they might be involved with like, find from like here, type file, and name, glob, ending in .emacs list. Okay, and whatever. But they'll run some find commands, and then we'll do some recursive grepping, and then maybe we'll open a file. Okay, and it works. So that's one workflow. The thing about that workflow that's unique to kind of Vim or Nano or something is your editor, Vim or Nano, loads and closes a lot. Like you open it and then you close it. You open it, then you close it. You open it, then you close it. So what's more common with Emacs is we just leave it open for weeks at a time. And so, people obsessing on the init speed of Emacs, like, oh, it took 1.5 seconds to open versus Vim. It opened in 0.10 seconds or less. So well, yeah, but I mean, that's more important in a Vim workflow than an Emacs workflow, because on an Emacs workflow, why do I want to close Emacs? It's kind of a meme. So, something to think about, food for thought, which kind of gets to how do we find files, grep files. I'll probably include that on a future video because I want to cover things like basic dev workflows, like using Git and Magit and finding files, grabbing files. It falls definitely into that category. Okay. So remaining to cover, I wanted to get into GPG. So if you have GPG set up already, well, if you don't, I would recommend just like GitHub GPG, generate a GPG key. So usually you need to install GPG if you don't have it, and then run this command. You can put a passphrase on it or not, and we're going to use these keys to encrypt files and decrypt files. So once you've gone through that, right here, generating a new GPG key, pretty decent tutorial. That will set you up with the prereqs. And now Emacs can actually be a front end to your GPG. So, for example, if I want to encrypt a file locally on my disk, I can literally type Control X, Control F, like whatever, encrypted, like let's go like super secret file. And then you want just use .gpg, hit enter, secret stuff here, Control X, Control S to save, and then it's a new dialog. And I'm jumped over there automatically, and basically it wants to use my key, so I'm gonna hit like tab a couple times to get down there. I'm gonna hit M to star it, to mark it, and then shift tab to get up to the OK sign. I'm gonna hit OK, and it says that it wrote the file. And to prove it, okay, so let's go, let's Alt X shell here, and we see over here is the super secret file. Let's just cat it blindly and see how secret it is. And look, it's pretty dang secret, you know. So we have to use a typical GPG space dash D super, and then we can see it. So the secret stuff is here. But in Emacs, you can just Control X F on it and open it, and it'll know what to do. And it should ask you your password if you put a passphrase on it, but that's a more complicated subject in Linux because, okay, never mind. That's an Easter egg for everybody who's actually trying this for the first time. And then next thing I wanted to get into beyond GPG is the Emacs web browser. So Alt X U, and it asks you where you want to go. You can go to like google.com. All right, it's a web browser, and it's pretty junk, but it's good for text. It does show some images sometimes if it works. I guess we could look something up like GitHub, and we could Google it. It hates us because it doesn't support JavaScript. So really, I do personally set U for my default Emacs browser, but I just use it for text. So like if I click a link to documentation, like a good example would be if I'm like an Arch Linux wiki. Let's just look at the install guide. So if we were to open this page in U, it should be legible. So we can kind of scroll through here. We can see all the subjects, like verify the boot mode. And it's great for documentation. I can highlight some stuff, copy, paste. Okay, so if I set it to my default browser and I click the link and it loads in U, it's like, I mean, it's gonna work great if I'm doing work and looking at documentation, no problem. But if I click something like YouTube, you know, you're pretty screwed. So like, let's go to like youtube.com. And so being how screwed this is, there should be a shortcut where you hit the ampersand. So shift 7 shift 7 in U will open a tab in your default graphical browser. So there you go. It took me to YouTube. So that's the Emacs web browser. Yes, there are others. People have gone really crazy with it, trying to make things better, but those are pretty much default vanilla Emacs things that work pretty good. The next thing is IRC. So if I want to join like Libera IRC, we do need a little bit of configuration, which I guess I'll put a link to like a GitHub repo in the video description, and it'll have some examples in it, have any code that's on my screen from there. So if we wanted to do that, all we need to do is uncomment this code I already put in here. So this code is going to require the default IRC client of Emacs. I'm already set up on Libera. It's going to use this username on Libera. It's going to use this password. And it's going to join libera.chat. It's going to put me in 2 channels. It's going to go over TLS. And I mean, it's going to automatically identify me too. So I don't have to do that /nick stuff with my password here in this variable, which is actually, since you know how to create a GPG file, it's in this Emacs list GPG file, which I'm not going to open because that's my IRC password. But in the file, it's basically this. It's one line. It just says like make the variable my IRC password, and then see, my password is there, and that's all that's in the file. And so that's how you can do that. It's abstracted, just that one line. And then so that's IRC. So if we look at it, for example, Alt-X IRC, I forgot to evaluate. I'm gonna kill this. Okay, so I saved this file, Alt-X eval buffer. Since it's uncommented, it's saved, it's evaluated. Now Alt-X IRC again. Okay, it says my nickname is registered, but also it logged me in. It says you're logged in. So I'm definitely logged in. I'm identified. And there you have it. So also Control XB now, and I hit tab and I should see some channels. Yeah, hashtag Emacs. Let's go. Hello world. They'll probably be mad at me. And then, so yeah, everybody's in here chilling. Remember to post your term bans. Don't spam the chat. All right. I got created in like, what is that, Chinese? Korean? No, I think it's Chinese. I don't know. Some of these channels are super funny. I love this old school shit. You want to jump on a Discord? I will not see you there. Okay. So I'm going to jump over to my other buffer, I guess. And we were on EU. Cool. You can hit Q to get out of this. No, I'm back. Let's go to the scratch. No. I killed the scratch, didn't I? Go to messages. Anyway, the next thing on the items to do, I wanted to check out email. So I don't recommend email. I use Thunderbird primarily, but Emacs in GNUs, Emacs email in GNUs, GNUS, Alt-X GNUs. Let's go. And it just checked my email. Sometimes you need to hit Shift L here. And for me, it shows my hidden drafts. I'm not a GNUs expert, but you can jump into your inbox. You can like jump to the bottom and like I can check out some Reddit graphical emails. Again, kind of like EU, uses the EU browser. Kind of garbage, but usually you can get down somewhere and find an unsubscribe link, like this one. Let's see. I can run all my Emacs keys down here though. So if I jump to the window and search for unsub, there it is. Now, this is actually a link. I could hit enter and just click it, but I don't recommend that because most of these websites require JavaScript nowadays. But you can hit W. That copies it. Then you can jump over to a real browser and paste it in and be pretty finessed about it. We could YOLO. Let's click it, and then it was smart enough to open it in the other browser. I don't know, guys. This is just an adventure, okay? So you can do email. Hopefully people are sending you text emails, and because text emails really work great. But nowadays, most of this, I just get a bunch of spam. But text emails are no problem. If it's an HTML email, it may or may not be what you want. But yeah, now we can send an email to whoever. Send me an email if you want to. Obviously, I've put my emails all over the place. There's no passwords in here, but I don't really give a shit. If you want to target me though from this video, go to Debugging at riseup.net and say hello world to me and what's up, and then from here you'll hit Control-C and that'll send an email, and then Q, and then Q. Do you want to be done? Yes. Okay. So how did we read email and send email? Again, I'll put it in the stuff in the channel description to GitHub. For GNUs, particularly in Emacs though, it's a .gnews.el file. So here we are. You can put income. So basically, I think I'm set up for POP here. So with POP, I have a username and a host and a port and an SSL setting. And then for SMTP, I have from and full name and from address, reply to, and then an SMTP host name, an SMTP port, an SMTP username, start TLS, and then all we need is the password. And I can't, oh wait, yes I can, because Emacs stars the contents of that file. So here we go. And particularly for that one, it is sending out, oh shit. Yeah, so after this call, after this video, I'm gonna decommission that key. But basically, this line here, machine, hostname, login, username, password, and then the password and the port and the 587. That is gonna be where it gets its credentials. GNUs does that by default. So there's your authinfo.gpg. So that's how GNUs works. It requires this at a minimum, I guess. I try to keep it simple. Some people go nuts and set up multiple email addresses and news readers and stuff like that. Yeah, that's not me though. So we have encrypted files. We have tried the web browser. We've used IRC. We went over things we missed before and some conventions and general words of advice. The final thing I would say about Emacs beyond, we're going to get into dev stuff later, like Tramp and Magit and programming languages and LSP auto-completions and stuff like that, and troubleshooting and linters, and we can get into all of that. But just wanted to kind of finish the introduction on vanilla Emacs, what it can do in this video. I'm sorry it was a bit of a mess, but hopefully helpful for some. If it wasn't, cool. And then, so basically, I would say the last things that a lot of people do with Emacs is you can use XWim if you're an Emacs guy. A Linux guy. So if you can find it, apparently it moved. So here's a repo with XWim. You can actually have a whole Emacs window manager if you never wanted to leave Emacs. Knock yourself out. No pictures, but it looks like Emacs, I guess. The one thing about it is if you use XWim and if you open like Google Chrome or something, if you open Google Chrome inside of XWim, it's literally your browser is in your buffer list, which is pretty cool. I used to do that. And then final, I guess, nugget is back in the day, a few years ago, long time ago, I went nuts on Emacs init systems. And I booted into Linux with Emacs as PID1, which was pretty fun. So yeah, I initted Linux with Emacs, called it System E to troll, and you know, here's the init script. Turn it on. It's kind of fun. And basically, we set our path. We return some output, and basically start mounting proc and sys and run and dev and all this stuff. Setting some permissions and udev, and eventually we set our host name, and then we start some services, including the Getty. We start the Getty. So I don't really recommend that other than an exercise in futility, but yeah, I did that, and it was fun. I recommend just having fun. If you're not having fun with this stuff, it's probably not worth it. That's what it looked like on my laptop when I used to turn on the computer. Begin System E initialization. So yeah, I hope this helps someone. I need to go decommission an SMTP key on AWS. Have a good day.